Hi there and welcome. Today I'm talking about using selective color adjustment layers in Photoshop. And this is, if you're not familiar with it, this is a really interesting one of various ways um, that we can work with our tones and colors in the image. But this is a very interesting one. It's quite allows you to make quite subtle targeted changes to particular colors in your image. So if we, from my adjustments panel here, I'm just going to choose selective color. Let's have a look at our layers. This image has had some editing already. That doesn't really matter. So if we fire up the adjustment layer, you can see that at the top here we have the various options relating to making changes to colors. We also have the layer mask where we can work on density and feathering should we decide to actually mask out some of our color changes. But for purposes of this, I'm going to talk mainly about kind of global, what are effectively global changes to the image, but they are targeted on specific colors. So if we start at the beginning with the blacks in the image, you can select relative or absolute. As far as I can tell, the absolute just gives you a stronger version of it. So these don't make a huge amount of difference. I normally tend to go for relative because I'm looking for more subtle effects. And so let's just see what happens if. So with this slider, if we move the slider to the right, this means that we're going to add more black to our blacks. And as I move this across, you'll be able to see, if I push it all the way, and then toggle it off, you can see how the effect that has had of really intensifying anything black in the scene. If I push it all the way to the left, it starts to look a bit crazy because it's taking blacks out completely from various parts of the image. So in general with selective color, whilst it's interesting to see what it can do if you kind of max it out, most of the time I think what we're looking for is a fairly subtle enhancement. So if we, for example, if we were to just push our blacks, make our blacks more black, perhaps up to about 12%. And that gives us a slightly more kind of contrasty look in the image. Now, if we look at the other colors, if we add yellow into our blacks, or if we push the other way, you can, perhaps it's easier to see that we're pushing blue into our blacks. Same with magenta. If we push magenta on our blacks, we're adding magenta. If we push the other way, we're adding the opposite of magenta, which is green. And with cyan, if we push more cyan, we're getting more cyan tone in the dark areas of the image. If we push the other way, we're going to get more red, which is the opposite of cyan. So if you start sort of working with this, I think you'll be able to see fairly soon, as I say, that a fairly light hand with this is probably your best bet. And you can you can experiment with just adding small amounts of toning into various areas of the image. Now, if we look at neutrals, this is our greys. So if we push black into our greys, you can see that we're getting, or if we go the other way, push white into our greys, you can see the sort of effect that we're getting. So if we're to push more black into the greys here, we're getting even more of that sort of more contrasty effect. And if we toggle off, once again, you can see where we're heading with this. And once again, if I wanted to, I can, for example, push red into my greys or some cyan as I wish. Now, if I move on to my whites, if I add more white into my whites, more black into my whites, you can see that's pushing down because we've got a bit of white on our face. So if we wanted to bring the model's face up a little bit, we could push some more white in. And then, well, we can add other colors, but we probably don't want to add more yellow into our whites at this stage. But okay, so those are the blacks, neutrals and whites, and if I toggle that off completely, you can see the effect of that has just been it's made things a little bit sharper, a little bit more defined. It's made the colors pop a little bit more. If, for example, I wanted to target obvious colors in the image, so if I look at her scarf, I'm pretty sure that's going to be yellow. So if I was to push black into the yellow, you should be able to see that the rest of the image isn't really being affected much, but the scarf is getting darker and darker. Similarly, if I push the other way, the yellow of the scarf becomes whiter and whiter. So I might decide that I want to use a little bit of that to just add some luminosity, some white color into the scarf. Then if I try to push yellow into the yellows, then that is going to make this yellow color more intensely yellow. So if I really want the scarf to stand out more, I can push yellow into the yellow. Then, for example, if I wanted to push some red into my yellows, you can see that's altering the tone of the scarf. And in some ways it's making it a slightly more, it's taking some of the sort of greenish tinge out of the scarf and possibly making that slightly more attractive shade of yellow. So we can do that. And then let's just toggle everything off and on again. And you can see, hopefully, that as we're doing this, we're getting a more sort of intense effect from the colors in the image, from the colors we've already got, really, which I think is the main event. We're trying to enhance the color that we've already got in the image here. we are changing it to some extent, but we're kind of pushing what's already there. Now, if we another sort of obvious point is the hat. So if I was to select blues, and obviously you'll probably be able to guess that if I push black into the blues, then the hat is going to get sort of darker and darker. And if I push more white into the hat, it's going to get a bit brighter. If I push blue into the blues, then I'm going to get a more intense color on the cap she's wearing. Or I'm going to get, if I push more yellow into the blue, I'm going to get more of a sort of kind of desaturated effect there. Similarly, if I've got some green in the image, I've got this sort of area of grass behind her. So if I push black into my greens, it's going to have the effect of darkening that green area. If I push white, it's going to have the effect of lightening that up. If I decide to push more green into my green, like so, I'm going to get let's toggle that off. I'm going to get a more intense green shade, which I probably don't want here. And if I push some red into my greens, it doesn't make a huge amount of difference. So once again, as we're going along, if we toggle this off, toggle the whole adjustment layer off, and then flip it on again, hopefully you can see the effect of what we're doing. And if we were to say we pick up reds, now we do have some red in this image. Sometimes find you just kind of experiment picking up red in the sky there. So I'm pushing more black into the reds. And then I could push more red into the reds, which kind of makes that this area here a little bit more vibrant. And just here on the other side of them. If I push cyan, it makes it more kind of muted. So I might decide to go for that. And I'll just toggle off again and bring that back. And obviously, I think you can see that what we're doing here, what we're concerned with is just making some fairly subtle tonal changes to the image in the interests of possibly giving it a bit more impact. And since when we're doing it this way, we're actually making global changes to the image. So you always want to just check we may, if you aren't careful, you can find that, possibly in trying to make your scarf a bit more intense, you have inadvertently added some color to her face, which you didn't want. And of course, one thing we can do at any point in the proceedings is, say we decided that we really wanted to mask, we didn't really want these color changes on her face, we just wanted these on her, on these other areas of the image. So it would be fairly easy for us to just with our black brush selected, we can just take the color changes that we've made away from the face, and then we could quite easily decide that we wanted to work on her face separately. And perhaps if we were doing that, we might create another selective color layer, and we might do some work purely on her face. So, for example, if we push some white in on her face, we might then invert that and just decide that we want to have that only affecting the model's face. But we're not, we're not sort of going in full process edit mode here. We're just really talking about using selective color. And so there you can perhaps see that we've caused her face to pop just a little bit more there, but we've kept her face isolated from these other color changes which we made around her. So let's just, I'll just fold that down and we'll leave that one there. And I just wanted to talk about the black and white image as well. If we create a selective color layer on here, then for example, trying to put blues into our reds, we're going to find not very much happens because we haven't really got any reds because it's a mono image. With the mono image, we're more inclined to work on blacks, neutrals, and whites, which is what we've got. So we can see that, of course, if we push black into our blacks, you can see the effect of that. If we push white into our blacks, obviously we'll go the other way. So we might, with a mono image, we might, for example, decide that we would like to push black further into our blacks. And then we might decide that we want to push more white. Sorry, that's adding black going the other way is going to add more white into the whites. And if we flip that on and off, hopefully you'll be able to see that takes us into an area where we're getting a kind of more contrasty look. Although we haven't actually used contrast itself, we're just playing with these blacks and whites, trying to get a more intense effect from our mono image. And if we go into neutrals, such as our greys, if we push more black into the greys, you'll see that has the effect of darkening everything. If we push white into our greys, that's going to brighten everything up quite a bit. And so I might want to work, kind of cycle around my blacks, neutrals, and I might find that I like the much more sort of luminous effect of having the neutrals there. But then I might decide that I want to push more black in to sort of balance that and compensate for it. I might find that I want to tone down the white which I've added into the whites, just to balance that. Sorry, this is black going into the whites, isn't it? Always remember which which way you're going. Black, adding black into the whites means pushing black slider up, as you can see, plus. Going the other way, we're adding white into our whites. And if I toggle that off again, then once again, I think you can see, similarly with the work we did on the color image, that we can get more impact from the image by using selective color to just pick out different tonal ranges in the image and move them around. And similarly, I could, for example, if I decide that I want to actually do some color toning on this mono image, I might decide that I would just maybe push a little bit of cyan there, for example, or perhaps even add a little bit of blue or yellow. And I think with these, I would want to be pretty light touch is nice. You know, if you just add a little bit of tone, it can make the mono image more attractive in some ways, but you do not want to overdo it. So, you know, here I'm working in kind of 2s and 3s. I don't really want to add much of this at all. So anyway, there we are. That's really just a sort of introduction to the kind of things that we can do with our just snapshot there. That's the original of our color image, and that's the snapshot after we did some work with selective color. And as you can see, as I have been saying, these are like fairly subtle changes, but they can make quite a difference to the impact of your image. And similarly with the black and white, I'll just snapshot, go back to the beginning. The original image, you know, it's a nice image. It's got a lot of potential, but we've just used the selective color to enhance it, to sort of enhance the difference between different areas of the image. And we've only been really working on colors in the image. We haven't used anything else. So selective color is something you obviously can use in conjunction with the other methods and other approaches and ways of doing things. But I think you can certainly get some very pleasing and subtle effects using the selective color adjustment layers. So anyway, thanks for listening and watching, and I'll catch you soon.